Welcome to another ICS Village production. The ICS Village is a non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of industrial control system security. Visit our website at icsvillage.com to discover more about us, where to find the village, participate in our community engagement project, and how to sponsor and donate to the ICS Village efforts.
I got the Swiss cheese model lined up right here between the mask and glasses.
All right. Okay, everyone, we're going to get this workshop started. In case you think you're not in the right spot, this conversation is around registered apprenticeship, workforce development, and cybersecurity. So if you are in the wrong spot, please stay. We don't have a packed house. We need to talk to somebody. My name is Kairie. I'm the lead workforce development director at the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO. We represent labor unions throughout the state of Washington. And my portfolio specifically is around workforce development, education, training, registered apprenticeship. I'm going to identify our panelists by name, and then when I hand off the microphone to them, they're going to go into more detail about who they are and why they're here. First is Reid. She's with IBW, Local 77. The next is Josephine Hollandbeck, also a registered apprentice with IBW Local 77. Oh, 191, okay. Next we have Erin Cornelius, and she's with the car hacker. So if you want to know how to hack into a car, she's the one you want to talk to. And finally we have Skarr. And he is an instructor at Everett Community College, and also the person that's basically herded these cats together today. So thank you for joining us. I wanted to do just some level setting before I hand this off to everyone. First, who here knows what a registered apprenticeship is, okay? Who here has been a labor member before? All right, got a whole lot of new ones here. Okay, cool. So registered apprenticeship, at least in Washington State, right, is an education and training system that is the majority is hands-on learning, right? In Washington State, we have programs that are as few as 2,000 hours of hands-on learning with 144 hours of education in the classroom. And we have programs that go all the way up to 8,000 hours. And that's 144 hours of classroom training for every 2,000 hours of on-the-job training. And I'm not a computer hacker, cybersecurity whiz, but what I can tell you from my observations, at least in conversations with these individuals, is that you all have been doing basically a registered apprenticeship in learning how to do this work. We just don't have an organized program for it yet. As most of you are doing this, learning from one another, collaboratively, etc. Okay, so first up we have Christine, and she's going to talk to you about sort of why cybersecurity is important to the electrical industry, why it's important to our labor members, and how we're working with basically a virtual infrastructure. And for years, our labor union members have been working on physical infrastructure. So Christine, why is that? Oh, yes. Real quick,
do you want to let them know that this is kind of interactive?
Oh, yes, and this is interactive. So anytime you have a question, there'll be time there. We have space and time for questions afterwards, but if something pops up, please go ahead and ask the question along the way. Okay, Christine, why cybersecurity and electrical industry?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and I want to thank you for taking the time to sit in on this and a great opportunity to share with you our message. A little bit about IBW 77. IBW 77 is the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I represent the generation side, so in that there are many classifications within our family of IBEW internationally. We are all forms of transmission, generation, and distribution. So that's going to be it's going to be gas, electric, solar, wind, nuclear, hydro, the dams. The importance for the cybersecurity is that this space has pretty much been operated, as you've heard, hands-on. We have journeyman linemen who spend 5 years, 10,000 hours to have the ability to restore our infrastructure. When the power goes out, we're the people who put the power back on. So even our logo says, we are the people that bring the power to the people. The reason why it's so important is these classifications are changing with every evolving technology. Our journeyman linemen go out into the field, they're now operating laptops. They're now interfacing at a different level. So we were born out of the necessity for worker safety. Going back, I share with you, we're celebrating our 125th year from receiving our certification. At that time, we had a mortality rate of 50%. So it was critical. Everything that we do is obviously worker safety focused, community safety focused, and infrastructure focused. If anything were to go down, all of these new points that are critical and are subject to vulnerability, our members need to have the opportunity to upskill. And the reason why registered apprenticeships are so important is they are the gold standard of qualifications that can transfer to all different aspects of the thousands of classifications of workers we represent. We have the entire state of Washington, northern Idaho, and a small part of Montana, again in charge of all of that infrastructure. There are so many points that if we were to put this together and have the opportunity to include it in an already acknowledged registered apprenticeship program, and then at some point build upon a standalone apprenticeship with qualities, the standards. And I think you would all recognize that industries have their significant nuance, right? Utilities are specific. My background is 17 years with gas and electric. I don't know the elements of hydro, I don't know that, but we have subject matter experts, and if we have this benchmark of training with whatever we're doing, that they are mindful of their interactions in those vulnerability points, relay text, everything on the grid is us. It's really important that we create a standard, and this is a whole new space for labor. You would never think of cybersecurity and organized labor together. But this is going to benefit our members, it's going to benefit our employers, it's going to benefit our communities. We keep everything moving, and that includes commerce. So much is being decided on the inside of a light switch, but we really need to stand back and acknowledge that this is a fantastic opportunity to use those skilled workers who understand the nuance of utilities, whatever they come from, and add this to their education piece, and that will keep us all safe. So that's why it's so important.
All right, thank you. And I hope I don't tip over your water for this point. So Josephine is a registered apprentice.
I'm in the 8,000 hour inside wire.
8,000 hour inside wire, okay. So she's actually, her story is amazing, and we want to replicate this throughout the entire nation. So here you go, no pressure though.
Yeah,
so if you
right?
could just tell us what your story is, what your education and training and thinking is.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. Maybe the first time I've heard that. Usually people just ask me, what am I doing? So I'm in the last year of the Inside Wireman program. So basically I install a lot of these services, work in oil and gas facilities, other critical infrastructure. And I was fortunate enough to live near Whatcom Community College. And so I recently completed their bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, IT networking, and hoping to bridge these skills, and I just want to help protect our critical infrastructure. I've sort of brought all these things together because they seemed, in my mind, to be in alignment, but there was no clear path forward. There was not really a lot of folks that really saw maybe what I thought I saw. So it's nice to have that confirmation here in year 5 or 6, but there's definitely a need, and there's a lot of gaps, skills and knowledge gaps for cybersecurity within those critical infrastructure areas. And as you probably know, we're at least a decade behind in really getting those things secure across the nation. So I'm just here to show that there is a path, I guess.
Right. So can you tell us what exactly your path is or has been? So you have your degree.
Yeah.
And then.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was concurrently doing the apprenticeship and the bachelor's degree, and it was really intense. So if there's a more streamlined way to do that, and maybe have friends or do things that are fun sometime in your life, that would be really good. But from the apprenticeship side, there's a lot of training in electrical theory, obviously electrical systems, transformers. You get really familiar with the code, and at the end of that, when you have enough state registered hours, and that's where you have the what do you call it, registered apprenticeship. I'm from Washington State, so there's very specific ways in which you even earn those hours, and if it's not right, they don't count, basically. So I'm probably closer to 10,000 hours, but I'm not quite at the 8,000 that Washington wants me to have to be allowed to take their journeyman's exam for the O1. So with Wacom, they're what do you call it? It's Institution of Academic Excellence.
Center of Academic Excellence.
Yeah, which I don't know the specifics of that, but their program was really good. They covered all the basics and foundations for IT and, you know, sysadmin stuff. And then they had some ICS material as well. But it's all still very new, and bridging these things together is really where I hope this will go, because they're not all quite connected, and they don't necessarily play into each other. So I feel like it's taken maybe a lot longer than it would need to gain the foundation to try and work in that field of ICS security. And we need more people, as we all know. There's that disconnect between IT and OT, and then ICS is kind of like OT, but it's also its own thing. You have controls within oil and gas. You have continuous processes that, you know, they can't just stop. Like if you try to shut down a unit, it could take days or even a week to safely shut that down or start it back up again. And there's a lot of potential for injury to like everyone there or even the surrounding community. And I'm sure it's similar with distribution. I mean, you've got a lot of power behind those things and a lot of vulnerabilities, I would imagine. And just the things that I've seen, like working in various sites, we need training at like the individual level too, like why you wouldn't plug your personal laptop into a PLC or wander around the refinery with your cell phone, which you're not supposed to do. It happens. There's just some gaps, and we need to start closing them in a serious way. And talking about it's great, but I really hope that we'll start taking some action to move this forward as quickly as possible. Hope
That's what I wanted to ask, is to make sure how our...
And Dennis, we have some infrastructure problems here. The core doesn't go all the way to you. So
Oh,
you're
no.
going to have to come to me.
No, she answered what I wanted to kind of
okay.
her to say, so thank you.
But I'm sure we could hack into the tape and figure it out.
Post-recording.
I have like, this is like full disclosure. I've never, like, when Dennis convinced me that I should be a moderator panel, and I was like, oh, I don't know, cybersecurity and hacking, and this sounds very scary. And then yesterday, he told us about this wall of sheep, and I have to tell you that Christine and I have been so scared of this wall of sheep. We've seen a picture, we don't know what happened, so we're avoiding it at all costs. Okay, so Erin, you're actually doing this work, right? So this is like, I want to hear from your perspective. If somebody came to you and said, like, I want to hack into a vehicle, what expertise, experience do you wish that they even had?
Sure.
Okay, and I think you might
Does
have
it
to
reach?
come to me.
There's a lot more cord.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
But it's taped down.
Oh dear.
Sorry, Erin. So
Well,
Lean over. How about that?
sit.
Oh, look at that. We hacked
Can we put it?
we hacked into the problem.
Put it behind Christine.
Yep, we're good. Okay.
Not my fault.
Very good.
There we go. Thank
Okay.
you. Hey, now we got cord. Excellent. Okay. So I'm Erin.
That's how you're an electrician.
I'm a senior security researcher with GRIM. We do all sorts of security research. Some of you are familiar with it. You've got, stickers back there. We're one of the sponsors of the ICS Village. We help out in the car hacking village. In terms of what GRIM does, we do essentially just generically, you could say, security research. right? Somebody uses a product, a system, a vehicle, a network, whatever it is, people come to us and we can, we'll figure out what's going on, right? But when you take a look at, I've been doing this job now for about 5.5 years. Before this, I worked for about 15 years in software engineering. I worked in critical safety and real-time systems, doing embedded development and testing and integration. And before that, I've got a degree in computer science. That's all it is, right? There's nothing special about cybersecurity in my background. It was more of, I got experience working with the systems themselves by developing them, and then, it happened because of a network of people I'd gotten familiar with, I got the opportunity to come to GRIM. And in terms of the skills you need to do this, how you get them, if you take a look at everybody who right now is a professional in cybersecurity, right? People who've been in this job now for a few years, every single one of them got there because they were doing some sort of hands-on, they knew somebody who helped them learn. There was no, up until very recently, there's not really been any official training or degrees in cybersecurity. So the way you got the experience in cybersecurity was to just do it, right? It's essentially a set of informal apprenticeships or mentorship, right? And that's the way you learn. We've talked about, so we do car hacking, right? What would you need to do car hacking? I'd say in general, hacking is about 80% the same as if you're doing development. And so, but then there's also a bit of a mindset piece to it, right? You have to be able to think around the possibilities for what could happen, and that will help you know what options there are to secure or to look for vulnerabilities. In terms of, I lost track of myself, hold on. Right, so in terms of skills, I'd already learned some of the technical skills by working on the systems that I needed to get to kind of explore my way around these systems, right? But what I needed more formal training essentially on the reverse engineering aspect of it. How do you take something, what's important to look at, what is important to keep track of, and when you're doing these things, that's a lot of what was learned. How do you go about doing it? And then there was also an aspect of getting confidence in it. I'd say it was probably about 2 years in this job. I was hired in a senior position. It was probably about 2 years before I actually was confident in my own set of skills enough to not have horrible imposter syndrome. Everybody in this industry is very familiar with imposter syndrome. And if you don't have imposter syndrome, it's one of those things where people tell you probably should have it. But it takes time and hours to get the level of confidence in the subject matter and the skills and the tools to be able to do the work itself. In terms of, we've talked internally in our group. I'm in the cyber-physical security group at GRIM. Our specialty is all the things that control other things. So, ICS, ECUs that are in cars, medical devices, aerospace. I mean, everything out there is controlled by computers now. I'm sure you're all very well aware of this. And so all of those things that don't have an immediate interface, those are the things we specialize in. We've talked about it internally when we're trying to figure out how do we describe this job for bringing in new people. And we said, well, this was a few years ago, so this number may have changed, but at the time there's people leading the team was like, there might be 100 people in the world we could bring in and they wouldn't need any training at all. So we know for a fact that we have to mentor people when they come in. They may have a ton of experience, but unless you've got experience on the particular systems and the devices themselves, that's what it takes. So hiring's a challenge. We know we have to train people. We bring in people and we train them. We need anybody who's coming in has to know that they are going to get ready to learn a lot of things. It took me as a senior 2 years to feel comfortable with it. If you're going to come in younger than that, if you're going to come in with less experience, might take you longer. So you have to be patient. Everybody has to be patient with the people who are learning, and the people who are learning have to be patient with themselves. One of the things, so in terms of skills, though, if nobody has all the skills we need when we're looking to hire somebody, what do we look for, right? Well, what we look for is people who have diversity of experience, right? One of my colleagues, he worked in oil and gas fields. He worked in developing the communications to talk to all the different wells, and he accidentally bricked a few thousand of them once. So apparently that was an interesting.
That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's worse than the wall of sheep.
So here's what he said. It seemed to be a bad thing, but everybody essentially learns by hands-on, right? But yeah, so we look for people with diversity of experience, because the larger set of backgrounds we have, the more likely it is that somebody will actually have the skills and experience in a particular industry. In cyber physical security, one thing that's super important is kind of a pragmatism, right? You have to secure things as well as you can at this moment in time, and then make them better as we go. There's a lot of tendency in security to kind of be very black and white. Like, this is not secure or this is secure. Reality is that security is a matter of degree of security. How secure is it, right? And so we need to just improve things as they are, but to know where are the points that you can improve things such that it at least does the most amount of help that you can do right now. That's to be able to know where to do that, you have to have more familiarity with the systems themselves. And to get that familiarity, you have to spend time on them, right? Maybe you have to do an apprenticeship, right? People who would have an apprenticeship in a lot of these industries would have a ton of good real life experience for having knowledge on how to go about securing them. I think I've probably talked long enough. I could go on for ages. I don't know if there was something else that I
Yeah, is
missed.
there any questions before I move on to the next speaker? Okay.
I'll come up with more later, don't worry.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll just keep talking. Okay. So we don't, as you might have guessed, we don't have a state registered apprenticeship yet, but there is a federally recognized apprenticeship. And Dennis is the instructor for that RSI component, right?
Yes.
And also has is the instructor for the community college program for the associate's degree. So Dennis, talk about what you're doing now to get students educated and trained so that they can go on to work for you all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Thank you. Oh, there we go. Even better. Hello, everyone. My name is Dennis Skarr. I've been teaching at Everett Community College for about 9 years now, and we're standing up an industrial cybersecurity program slowly, as kind of COVID kind of wanes off. It's easier for the college to do things. But I've really been on this path for over a decade, and my origin story on kind of how I got here is very similar to Josephine's. So when I was introduced to her, I immediately was like thrilled to see how she was trailblazing into this space by kind of carving her own way through academia, as well as like that on-the-job experience. And in 2008, I got off active duty. I went to school for industrial power and control, but then I also joined the Air National Guard to get my IT training formalized, because I was a tinkerer, a hobbyist. I had no paperwork to back anything up, and I wanted to project myself into smart grid technology. I'm like, I need to know power, I need to know IT. I think there's going to be jobs here in the middle. However, that really wasn't the case, and I was informed by my instructor that smart grid's a theory, not an occupation, and I was a little bit ahead of the game. However, I stumbled across a Department of Energy grant in workforce development where they were looking at creating new occupations into smart grids, such as relay techs and other things. That's where I first met Kairie a long time ago. So, strangely enough, the Guard unit that I was working in was combat communications. It's a dwindling unit that was really not getting a lot of traction. So like, how about cyber ops? So I went to cyber ops, to try and just see where that went. And strangely enough, in that journey, I got pulled into a unit where they specialized in doing assessments on critical infrastructure and cyber physical systems. And I spent the next 10 years with them developing and delivering training, and also doing missions across the spectrum all over the world on how you can actually look for different vulnerabilities and assist the customer to actually improve those. So while I was kind of doing operations with the guard, I was always looking at my program at Everett, like how can I take my lessons learned, the need to actually have more students just aware of the situation and the severity of what the impact could be if, you know, nation states or whoever were to actually start taking down segments of critical infrastructure, what that would look like. And it even started with an initial class that we kind of branded as Information and Cyber War, which was targeted towards criminal justice students. So that way they actually understand how they're dependent on all these devices for their everyday line of work. But what kind of happened a few years ago, which is really unique, is we were encouraged, or I was encouraged with a boot to actually pursue a large grant through the state of Washington to actually get some ICS equipment. So I reached out to Tom Van Norman. I was like, Tom, you know, we got some money, what can we build? So we ended up with a 15-foot wall with HVAC water systems, kind of modeled after what he has, and a handful of amazing trainers developed by Grimm, and 2 capture the flags on cyber physical systems, 1 at a high school level, 1 at a college level. So we have the technology, and I have the background in the network to get things going. And what I'm excited with the panel here is in order to actually create jobs, and to create jobs that to create students that employers are currently looking for, we need to create supply and demand on both sides of the spectrum.
Well, there's demand.
There's demand, but I need that demand from my leadership to see that demand so we can open up the throttle and have more training. And we kind of got to do both in this little bit of a balancing act. And we started with 1 5-credit class on assessing and securing control systems, which is an overview of everything, very similar to a lot of classes that kind of do that same class. But what made this training equipment different is having like a student, like here, Chris, say hi. Chris was the first student to actually hack the wall, and just the reaction that he had when he did something, not through a simulator, but when he made that water turn on all by himself, you saw a spark and a passion in his eyes where he's like, holy shit, this is real. I just did this. And students who continue to have that hands-on learning with the real equipment, it is an absolute game changer as an instructor with sparking passion, seeing them off a virtual machine doing something real world. And this isn't theory, this isn't boogeyman stuff. So, you know, we're working with taking that training to the next level, and then, you know, partnerships with the IBEW is really the rocket fuel that we need right now in order to, you know, to ensure that there are the employers at the other end that are receptive to this. So the big initiative we're currently working on right now is trying to find students or existing workers in the utilities that would be interested in that skill up. If you're customer service, you know, and you're interested in a career change and already an IBEW member, you know, can we build a training pipe for you? If you're a you know, relay tech, like how do we skill up the right amount of cyber to make you a little bit more savvy in your day-to-day operations? And we're looking at the whole kind of IBEW family as how do we like cyber them up, so to speak, so that they can be a little bit more effective in cybersecurity. And then I think our big goal is to even explore a new occupation and career code in industrial cybersecurity through the IBEW as well. But we kind of got to start with the easier, I would say easy, I think that's the wrong way to describe it.
The less obstacle path.
Yes. And we're starting to get some good headway right now in the state of Washington with what it is that we're doing. And my class is currently part of that training that we're exploring, as well as a suite of other options. But we're getting more and more different apprenticeship programs that are interested as word gets out. I have to thank Tom Van Norman and Bryson Board for getting me on stage, giving me an amplifying tool. Every time we go out and talk, we get more employers that are interested, more potential apprenticeships. And you know, if every community college wants to actually kind of create more classes, we really need to have those employers saying, hey, we're looking for those students, we're going to pay them a living wage, we're going to pay them for their skill sets, and bring them in. And that's slowly starting to happen, and we're really excited about the work that we're doing.
To add on to that, you know, like I said, everybody here in cybersecurity right now who's doing this job, who has been doing this job for years now, All of the OGs here, they're all self-taught. They all learn by hands-on, by working with each other. So what's the trick when it comes to hiring? You always hear about this. There's a huge gap in the number of people who can be hired right now for cybersecurity jobs. But there's people who have skills and experience who can't get those jobs because they don't meet some specific, they don't have their CISP or whatever the heck other certificates you have. They don't have a formal degree in it, and if you've been working in this field for a while, you've got the experience. You don't need the degree necessarily. The trick is, how do you tell people who are potentially looking for workers, for people to hire, how do you tell them that how do you show them you've got the experience, right? How do you show them what's going on? And very much in this industry, I mean, every industry is like this to some degree, but very much in cybersecurity, it's mostly, the easiest way to do it is essentially a networking thing. You talk to people, you get to know people who work at different industries, you kind of work together on CTF teams, and then they get to see the experience and the skills of all the individual people. And then, DEFCON itself here is effectively one gigantic networking event, right? If people talk about partying or whatever, honestly, the best part of DEFCON is going out, meeting new people, learning what they do, and hanging out for a bit, right? That's how we share knowledge about who's got what experiences, and you find out what jobs and companies are out there looking for people. So, if there was a more streamlined way to do this, right? If you had a more formal way of doing an apprenticeship that was able to, so companies would be able to see, we know that these people have a certain amount of time looking at this, OT equipment, looking at cybersecurity. That seems like it would make life a little bit easier, both for people trying to hire, but also for the people trying to get a job, right? Because it's always going to be hands-on real-world experience, but how you show that is an extremely diverse and mixed up at the moment, between some formal high-cost certifications, between just informal hanging out and playing a CTF with people. It all varies wildly.
Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I do a lot of EW workers, and I'm just wondering, how do you bridge that knowledge divide? A lot of workers I work with, couldn't even send an email, right?
Yeah.
We just talked
I mean
about
that
that.
respectfully, because
Yes.
they work with their hands all day
Yep.
long, and they're not dealing with, they have a foreman who'll do all the emails and they'll do it all that. How do you bridge that divide?
Want to start this?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. I definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of for you too. It's like do you start that at the contractor level? Because they pull these guys out of the hall. They might have their mainstay people, like a lot of the foremen and PMs and superintendents that they keep it within there, and they might be in a specific refinery, so they might be connected in with the people who, like the I&E team of the refinery and their engineers. I think training is always a good start, but it's like, who do you train? What do you train them on? A lot of the guys I work with, they don't want to sit at a computer and type emails and stuff like that. Like you say, they're in the field with their hands, and that's a really good question. I think maybe I'll hand this off to you now.
Well, the great thing about this panel here is IBEW has two sides of the house, and so you have representative here at the inside of the house, which is on the contractor building aspect of things. The outside of the house is referred to the generation side. So it's a great question. We have incredible, I'm just going to go to something that most people will identify with, journeyman linemen, okay? Brilliant superheroes, I would say. They're hanging from helicopters, they're doing the high lines, they're doing the stuff that you see in movies, right? If they're doing their own stunts essentially. There's no margin of room for error because you either come home alive or you're dead. The stakes are quite high. But having said that, the work itself is now incorporating these elements, if you will, of the internet, of technology that had never been there before. So it's beginning to take shape there, but as you're moving through different classifications, if you want to move to an area that now is very technology challenged, This is where it would be critical when you ask, how do we connect these? For the classifications that maybe didn't have this element before, a registered apprenticeship add-on to an existing registered apprenticeship would bridge that gap. And we represent thousands of classifications, workers in the dam. We have a lot of our members who are on the generation side come from military. They bring with that experience, but we also have people, for myself, that came up through a local private utility on the gas and electric, beginning at the basic call center level, going up to dispatching, ordering service cars, needing to have all of that. That was along the way, but there's a breakdown there too. We need to have some sort of benchmark, as you said, bridge the gap so we all know what our skill sets are and where they would be transferable to other classifications.
Oh, just a quick add. I was just thinking, like in 191, we have different classifications, like an instrumentation tech, and he's going to be installing, you know, the tubes and the instruments and things like that. And he's like whole separate pay scale that lines up with journeyman and stuff. Union can be kind of like that. But yeah, I think having a specific cybersecurity related like person who you would ask the members like who's interested in this role, and then you would need to have a training for them that's like, okay, now you know enough to at least be looking out for this kind of stuff and be our contact point with engineering.
So in terms of the question about how do you get people who have hands-on experience out in the field, how do you integrate them into computer systems and such to be able to send emails and whatever else is necessary for the job. For myself, I know if I've got something I'm doing, I have to do for my job, but it feels like a distraction, I will just ignore it until I get yelled at about it. My way of handling things is if I've got something going on that's the highest priority thing, everything else just sits to the side, and when I start getting yelled at, I know that the priorities have changed. Right? This is how I manage. This is how I manage my time. So for a lot of people who are out there in the field and have done hands-on stuff, it probably feels very much like a distraction. You have to get out a computer and learn how to do it. So it's going to be a period of time and hands-on to get more familiar with it and integrate that into how they work. At the same time, coming up through software engineering, I also know that people have different skills. They have different ways of going about doing things. When I would work on embedded systems, designing them and integrating them, every once in a while, I would bring up an option, so for safety critical systems, obviously safety is important. Part of the design process, it's a little bit different formally in different industries, but essentially, one of the processes, you try and think about all the different possibilities for what could go wrong, and design safety measures and interlocks there, so that, you can't, so the device or whatever is unable to, through an accident, hurt somebody, kill somebody. But sometimes we'd be designing things, and I would bring up I would talk to some of the people designing these, and I'd say, well, what happens if this scenario happens? And they'd just look at me and be like, why would anybody do that? And that right there is essentially the divide between development and cybersecurity, is being able to think about the different scenarios. Now that's obviously if somebody's doing something intentional, that's not an accident. So that's the way you manage those priorities is a little bit different from industry to industry and company to company. But at the same time, it kind of also demonstrates another thing that we need. We need different levels of experience, right? We need people who do development, hands-on, they're on the lines. We also need people who do all the different cyber and control aspects of things, develop those, test the physical systems. We also need people who are able to bridge some of the communications divide, essentially, between those different groups. If it's difficult and time-consuming to get emails sent, maybe it's not even an efficient use of their time to train them in sending emails. And some sort of alternate method of getting clear communication between everybody is necessary. What that would be, I don't know. It probably varies depending on industry and person to person. But everything regarding, honestly, everything between creating anything, any product, it's all about communication, right? You think people talk about like requirements documents, testing documents, writing comments in code. All of these are just communication devices. The code itself is a communication device, right? You're trying to communicate to the computer what you want it to do. And if you don't speak its language properly, what you've done is you've created bugs. right? The bugs themselves are essentially a miscommunication between the people developing it and the system itself. Writing comments and documentation, that's a communication to other people you're working with, and also your future self about what you were trying to do at one particular moment in time, right? But that communication doesn't just happen on the development of the systems, it happens between people in the field working on jobs all the time.
Thank you for your question. So one of the things that makes community colleges, I would say, unique and effective is we're very good at retraining, worker retraining. When the economy's in the dumps, that's when enrollment spikes at community colleges because people lose their jobs. You know, we're in a region where we have a very large aerospace manufacturer that kind of has boom and bust cycles for hiring. So I'm very familiar with, you know, students coming into my office saying, hey, I was a machinist for 20 years, I got laid off, I want to move into a job that isn't going to go away and a little bit easier on my body, you know, like I'm trying to get there. So I think community colleges are just fantastic vessels for that. And one of the first things I do with that student is let them know that, you know, you're retooling into IT, and you're new to IT workforce, but you still have 20 years of workforce experience. You know, you have all these other skill sets that are still salvageable and very marketable to the employer. So I think that takes a little bit of, like, it puts a little bit of pep in their step, but it makes them very effective when it comes time for them to graduate from our program and combine those two skill sets as they look for work. And I think that's a very effective tool when it's applied appropriately. So someone, if they're coming with double E skills, you know, to me, I mean, we can give them credit through competency through some classes, like the lower level classes, we can award credit and crosswalk them. If they hold a certification, we give credit. So they don't have to take as many classes. And that's kind of what we're also looking at with this program as well, is if you're moving from one occupation to the next, like, let's give you credit for what you've done, so we only need to focus on what you need to actually learn as you progress forward. And that whole competency-based model is pretty easy for us to do on the IT side, especially if they're military and they hold, you know, they're part of 8570 and they have to have different security requirements, those CompTIA certs, easy. You have a Valid A+, here's 10 credits for our program, you know, you move right up to Security Plus. So that's something that we're very much focused on as we move this program forward. So if someone is looking for that next move, please come talk to us because we're hungry for those type of candidates as well.
Yes, go ahead.
So this is for Josephine. Is that Erin?
I'm Erin.
Oh, God, I'm sorry. Erin.
Okay.
So when you're reverse engineering like a chip or something,
Sure.
You find a vulnerability. What happens next? You report it to the vendor. How responsive are they?
Sure. I don't know if everyone heard that. The question was, when we're reverse engineering something, we find a vulnerability, how do we report that and manage that? And this kind of changes a little bit based on, you know, kind of what you're working on at the time and the types of agreements that are in place. We very well might be working on taking a look at a particular product from a customer, right? And we find out that there's some underlying flaws in the system itself. Typically, the way things work out with NDAs and contracts and such is that we report it to that particular, you know, to the company itself that made the product, and then they would have to get back to the supplier and sort things out on their side to kind of work out because that happens all the time. Just like in terms of chip errata, right? Somebody says, okay, well, here's this. I'm trying to make this chip talk to this PCIe bus and so on and so forth, and they can't get it to work. So they can talk back to the vendor, who, you know, the chip manufacturer, and then they find out, oh, well, it looks like there's an errata. For some reason in this series of chips, you've got to do this type of thing to make it work instead of this thing that we planned on and had documented. So chip errata happens all the time. In terms of security, you could think of it as very similar. So most often we'd have to report it to somebody, our customer, and kind of report out the chain. But it does vary from project to project, subject matter to subject matter, because some things are in the public good for them to know. Sometimes things need to be, you know, sometimes fixes are more complicated, and it's necessary to be, you know, working for a company that does this. It's a little bit easier for everybody's lawyers to kind of argue with each other, and in the end, it's not really my problem. We talk to who we need to talk to for the contracts, and then we kind of let the legal stuff be sorted out according to whatever is appropriate.
familiar with Underwriters Laboratory, UL listing. So we have listings for like industrial panels, 508A, and intrinsically safe, 698A, I believe. Perhaps there's something there that we could do to create standards for like, this is listed for secure. I don't know if those things exist yet.
I think UL is looking into it. I'm not familiar.
Right, yeah, it seems like, you know, you get the little stamp or whatever, this has been checked or something. It was just a thought I had.
So I don't know if there's any other specific, I don't know where we are in time.
We're like ready to wrap it up.
Are we?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try and hit this real quick. In terms of training, we talked about hands-on. I only learn by hands-on. You can give me a video, you can give me a set of instructions. I don't know what that means, right? I only do things and learn by sitting down myself, touching the devices, and screwing them up. And then learning how to unscrew it up, right? My hacking and reverse engineering skills, I'm fairly sure, are just because I can't follow directions. So my whole life I sat down at a computer, somebody says, here, do this, and I don't do that because I can't follow directions. And then, so I learned how to get myself out of trouble, find out what's wrong, get myself out of trouble whenever I screw something up, right? That's sort of hands-on stuff that's where I learned. We talked about the wall in the training that we developed. Whenever Grim does training, we like to have it be real stuff, real hands-on. We don't like to fake things out unless there's like a specific purpose for it, right? So if you come over to the Car Hacking Village, we've got a 2012 Ford that's kind of put up on some plywood. Parts of it anyway, not the whole thing. And it's just the ECUs themselves. There's no trickery involved in it, and we sit down and we show people how to, with their hands, figure out what reverse engineer what message unlocks the doors and send it themselves, right? So you're able to get onto the secure communications bus and do that. I'm sure everyone's familiar with, or they should be familiar with, the degrees of knowing things, with the levels of knowledge. I always get these a little bit wrong, so correct me if I get a bit off, but it's basically like knowing that something is possible, kind of seeing somebody else do it, or like watching some training or whatever on it. But then eventually the next level is doing it yourself, hands-on, and it's a whole other change yourself when you see what's possible. If you're somebody out there who's written C code, you've probably done a buffer overflow by accident, right? That's just the nature of writing C. But the next level of cybersecurity is then learn how to exploit the buffer overflow you've created. And that's what teaches you how to exploit things and how it is possible to change the way you're telling the computer what to do through the user input that you did intent.
Awesome, thank you. So what I kind of wanted to bring, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, Erin, because the reason why when I had this opportunity to pursue a large bucket of money and I reached out to Tom was, seeing the wall, seeing the ICS Village and having a DEFCON experience, I wanted to bring that into my program in Everett, Washington. I wanted to bring the opportunities for students like Chris to have that passion just to hammer at this equipment and do his own work outside of the classroom and just provide that resource and capability. And we're starting to see that happen. And we wanted students to get hands-on with it. The step-by-step vendor labs, do this, they have their value, but there's a lot more value in experimenting, making mistakes, documenting things, not documenting things and have your partner like mad at you, like, why didn't you write that down? And have all those additional real-world learning experiences right here in our community. And we're really thankful that we reached out to Grim to actually partner with us, because that's the style of learning that we're trying to get into our program.
So I know we got to wrap up, but really super quick. So in one terms of that, if I learn by hands-on and screwing things up, if I'm going to learn how to manage and secure OT equipment, I don't want to do that hands-on in a real plant.
Right.
That feels like a bad idea.
Yeah.
But that's why the ICS wall here is, again, real equipment, demonstrating things, and then you can interact with it and see how the real system works.
With no explosion.
With no exploding and not poisoning millions of people.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all so much. If you would like to come work in Washington State, I know that one of our colleges is hiring for a Cybersecurity Center of Excellence director. I'm sure that if you'd like some additional training and education, Dennis and Erin would love to help out. So come find us.
And if you have any questions, please just find us around. I'll be at the Car Hacking Village.
We're going to be at the Car Hacking Village after we make sure we're not on the wall of shame.
I don't know where all you are.
And if you're looking for talent, please come talk to me. We have a lot of students with some amazing skills and ambition.
Great, awesome.
Thank you for joining us for another ICS Village production. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Find us on icsvillage.com to become involved with our community.